I'm talking now with Jenna Guillaume, author of What I Like About Me, You Were Made for Me, and her brand new novella, The Deep End. Jenna, you're a pop culture queen, and you were previously the editor of the sealed section at Girlfriend. I would like to hear a little bit more about that. But first, I wondered if you could tell us a bit on how you got into writing for teenagers.
Great question. I've been writing for teenagers my whole career, basically. As you said, I started out at Girlfriend magazine. I was at uni, and I don't think I deliberately was like, oh, I'm going to write for teenagers, but I was doing journalism, and I was doing a bunch of work experience positions, basically where you spend a week at the time I wanted to get into magazines. So I was doing different work experience in magazines, and I spent a week at Girlfriend magazine, and I just loved it so much. I loved the team, I loved the content, and I loved the readership as well. I was not far out of my teens myself, and it was very close to my own heart. So when I kept in touch with the team there, and when I left uni, I got a job at a Girlfriend. And so I worked there for 5.5 years. And through that was when I really, I'd been reading YA as a teenager, obviously, but then as a couple of years at uni, I thought maybe I tried to get into the serious English literature kind of stuff. But then back working at Girlfriend, I obviously wanted to stay on top of what readers were interested in. And I got back into YA and fell in love with it all over again. And I think that was what made me want to write YA as well, and to extend what I was already doing, writing for teenagers. So it took a few years, but I ended up getting there and writing some YA as well.
That's amazing. And what I've loved about your books is the way that they really honor friendship, female friendship, but also friendship between all teenagers, and really great family. Well, not necessarily great family relationships, but I love the representation of family in your books. As well as this real commitment to sort of body positivity and acceptance. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about whether that's intentional, how you approach it.
Yeah, both of those things are really intentional for me. I think actually working at Girlfriend magazine, and my own experience as a teenager and then working at Girlfriend, really reinforced the significance of friendship and body image in your teen years, especially. I mean, throughout your whole life, but especially in your teen years, I think. There's so much pressure at that time on how you look, and I feel like you're all raw nerve endings, and just like you just want to fit in, and you just want to be accepted by other people. And at the same time, like, your friends really reflect who you are, and as you're trying to figure that out yourself. And so they play such a crucial part in your life and can have a big impact on how you see yourself as well. So I think that's really, they were things that I wanted to explore when I was writing What I Like About Me, my first book. And very deliberately, the friendship and then the body positivity were the two factors that came through really strong, as well as the romance. I obviously wanted to write a romance just because I love romance, but those are the two kind of themes that I really wanted to explore. And then I guess it's just the things that I'm interested in. So it has become a bit of a running theme through all of my work from that.
I agree. When thinking about what to write, think about those things that come to you every single day, and they're the ones that are going to stick and that you're going to find joy in writing in. With What I Like About Me, I really loved, it reminded me a little bit of Dumpling in a great way. And I wondered about the teen response. I imagine your books really attract really lovely response from readers.
Yeah, it's been really beautiful. It's interesting you mentioned Dumpling, because I was in the middle of writing What I Like About Me when Dumpling came out. And they both, obviously, when you do the elevator pitch, the bare bones of it, they sound like the same book. As kind of like a fat girl enters a beauty pageant and works through her self-esteem and that kind of thing. And so I had a bit of a meltdown, and I was like, oh no, this book already exists. Should I keep writing? And I had a great writing teacher who was like, no, keep writing. There's only so many stories in the world. There's always going to be like similar stories, but each writer has their own voice, obviously. And also, by mine being Australian, set it apart as well. And I was very deliberately trying to write a very Australian story. And so people have responded really well to that, both the Aussiness, without being like, I tried really hard to balance, like, I didn't want to be like Crocodile Dundee Australian, but actually, how Australia is. And it's a summer romance. And so I wanted it to be an Australian summer romance where we're experiencing the holidays, and you go away to a daggy caravan park with your family, and you eat sausage sizzles and pavlovas and all of that stuff. So people responded really well to that. And then also to the body positivity stuff. I've had a lot of really nice messages about people talking about even how Maisie starts to write a list of things she likes about her body, and people have told me that they've started doing that, and that's really special and really nice. Yeah, so that's probably the most rewarding part of the whole process.
Yeah, and I'm loving this emergence of books for younger teens, because I love YA and I write YA, but it creeps up, I think. It's probably to do with teenagers having that independence, and so if you make them older they can do other things. But I loved that caravan park setting and Maisie and her friends. I could smell it. I really could smell it. It was so relatable. And the romance, absolutely, throughout all of your books. I think reading it, and it's probably to do with writing for that slightly younger, that real true teen readership, the swoony romance, and it's like reading it as an adult is almost like cringy with how much you remember from your teenage years. How do you capture those awkward teen moments?
That's a good question. I think I remember very vividly what it was like to be a teenager and have crushes. And also, like, the boy I started dating, like, this isn't like, I don't recommend this for everyone, but I ended up marrying him later as an adult. And so I think, like, teen romance, the initial dating period is actually the only dating that I've experienced. And so I guess it's like very ingrained in me that, like, that's kind of like very natural, that it's the looks that you like, you look at them and they look away, but you catch them looking at you out of the corner of your eye, and like the fluttery feelings, and do they like me back, or you tell your friends and kind of like they tell their friends, and it's all like rumors are swelling around, but you don't talk to each other, and it's all very awkward but very sweet. Yeah, I think like there's just something about it that's really appealing, and I think I just I just remember it really distinctly, I guess. And I think it's fun because you can play with I often think in romance, the most fun part of reading it and or watching it, whatever, is often the tension and the build up before anything actually happens. And so much of that is happening when you're a teenager. Like, a lot of the romance is actually in that space. So I think that is really fun to play with.
And I've seen online, you obviously have a great interest in pop culture, but in film and television, and I always really appreciate the way that you talk about film and TV online, and I imagine that helps with your writing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so influenced by TV and movies. Obviously, I've always been a big reader, but I've always been a big screen watcher as well. And I think, especially probably, as I said, like when I was a teenager, I was very into teen shows like, this is showing my age, but like Dawson's Creek and The OC. And they all are full of those like fluttery, like when I watch those shows, I still get those fluttery feelings. And so like, I think tapping into that has been really key. And then I think even then going on to work at Girlfriend and later BuzzFeed, like I've always just stayed watching teen media, and I still love it. So it's always a good reminder. And like there's a certain aesthetic with teen movies and TV shows, I think, and it's just a really joyful place to be. I mean, there can be a lot of angst as well, but it's just a really, I guess all the emotions are really on the surface, and so it's really interesting storytelling. Yeah, so I definitely get a lot of inspiration.
Yeah, a real joyful moment for me last year was watching the first season of the Babysitters Club, the new Netflix Babysitters Club, and it was so perfect. I was a child of the 90s, so the original movie and TV series I watched and thought was great, but this, new level.
I loved it so much. I was really nervous because it was very dear to my heart. I've actually got, I don't know if you can see, but I've got all my Babysitters Club books on the shelf behind me that they're from when I was a kid. I kept them, and I collected them and kept them all these years. But and I love the TV show and movie from the 90s as well. So I was very nervous, but I was so relieved. I thought they did such a beautiful job of keeping the characters really authentic to the books, but updating them for a modern audience. And I'm so excited because the second season's starting soon. This show is not for me, but it kind of is. It's for original fans of the books as well, so it's great.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm really excited about it as well. And so I recently just read your new book, well, your new novella. It's this little weenie book,
Baby book,
The Deep End. And I've got a couple of things I wanted to. The romance in this one is so beautiful, and I was really impressed with the way that it rang so true, and it felt really authentic, even though it was such a short story. And I watched a little bit of your Insta stories when you were going through the writing and editing process. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how this book came about and how it was different maybe to writing a novel.
Yeah, it was quite different. It was all on a really condensed time frame for one. I usually, like, say with my first book, that took me a few years to write. It took me a few years to write off and on. And then my second book took me about a year. And so this was basically, I knew the I saw the Australia Reads campaign last year, and they released some books from that, and there was some novellas in that. And I remember thinking, like, oh, I'd love to write a novella. That would be so cool. Like, it feels like a different kind of challenge, because it's not particularly easy to tell a decent story in a really short time frame. And so when I saw the campaign was coming up this year, I talked to my agent about doing it and like really wanting to take part in it. And we brainstormed ideas for it. This was probably in January, I think. We brainstormed some ideas and talked about what could be like a really Australian subject that I could tackle in a novella that maybe wasn't worth a whole novel, but could be an interesting little story. And there were a few things we're tossing around, but one of them was the swimming carnival, because that's just such an Australian thing, and I think we don't often see it in fiction at all. And I remember, you know, the fear I would have around swimming carnival time and sports carnival time, and just like feeling sick about it, being like, I don't want to participate, I don't want to do this. And I feel like that from talking to my friends and just from growing up in Australia, like I feel like that's quite a common feeling. And so I thought that was something really interesting there to be able to tap into. So I basically went away and I immediately like wrote a chapter, which was the first chapter in the book, which is when Rosie, the main character, is participating in the swimming carnival, but she kind of stops midway through her race because she can't really swim very well. She can kind of like she can get through the water, but she doesn't have any kind of technique or anything like that. She just feels so humiliated. So she kind of drags herself out of the side of the pool and everyone's like staring at her, and she just feels absolutely mortified. And so that chapter I felt quite strong about. And I felt like this immediately, like she kind of sprang to life as a relatable character that I felt I could go somewhere with. And then there was Jake, who was watching in the background, who's kind of the love interest. And I thought, okay, he's interesting. What can I do with him? And so I sent it off to my agent, and then she really liked it too. And so we had to basically get my publisher on board, and they were excited about it and excited about Australia Reads. And then from there we pitched to Australia Reads. And yeah, when I got the go ahead that I was going to be an ambassador and they wanted to publish the novel as part of the campaign, I basically, I had about probably a month maybe to turn around a draft. But I actually did the other than the first chapter, I did the first draft in about a week, and then obviously went back and reread it and redrafted and that kind of thing. But it was a much quicker process. And then even like the editing from there, it was kind of like back and forth very quickly over about a month. And then within another month I kind of saw the cover, and then it was going off to print. And so it was like, and you mentioned my Instagram updates, like I wanted to do Instagram updates because I think people are interested in the behind the scenes of making a book, but it often just drags out over like years at a time, and it's such a long process. But I was like, this is actually like kind of like a little microcosm of the whole process, much quicker, much smaller, but a good sample size of the whole thing, I guess. So it was much quicker than usual. And I think also with the length of it, like I could only get into like one aspect of these characters' lives, as opposed to, say, with a novel, there's a lot of different things going on, and you're balancing different subplots and that kind of thing. This was very much like, it was the surface story that I tried to go deep with, but very much like stripped to the essence, I suppose.
Yeah, well, interesting you say that it's that surface level, but at the same time, you've got these beautiful characters. Every single character that you do meet is really well rounded, and I loved those little moments in the schoolyard, like where Rosie and her friend are having their lunch, and that you feel the world is really rich behind it. I imagine all those side characters is something that you always explore in your writing. It comes through. So I hope you work at it, and building that really realistic world.
Definitely. I think I always want to ground it in like a really firm reality. And I think something that, say with my second book, I actually got criticism about, just from some, online reviews, and that there was too many friends in the group, because she's in a friendship group of like 5 friends, and there was too many to keep track of. And I understand that from a reader perspective, but it felt really important for me as a writer, because I think that's the kind of friendship group I had at high school. I had my one friend or 2 friends that I was very close to, but at lunchtime I would sit with a bigger group of people. And just little things like that, like it just feels really important to me, even though, within the constraints of a story and fiction, like I want it to feel as real as possible.
Yeah, that is a challenge, because exactly, your reader doesn't want to get confused. And similarly, like I had 3 Jesses in my high school group, but you couldn't get away with that if you were writing it.
Jess P, Jess C, yeah.
I think I have read a few really great examples of that, but I kind of want to write a book where everyone has the same name. Just see what happens.
That would be a fun challenge.
Maybe just for me. You have also been published overseas, so some of your books have come out in the States, and I wondered if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, it was really exciting to be published in America, because I never expected to, because as I said, I deliberately created very Australian stories, and America in particular tends not to be as open to outside cultures, even one that is in a lot of ways similar, very different in some ways, but similar in others. So I was surprised that they got picked up, and really pleased. And the editing process was interesting. There were things that I thought would change that didn't, and then there was things that I never expected to change that did. And so things like, for instance, with What I Like About Me, which is I wrote as a summer romance, and it's diary entries. So she's got the dates on it, so it says December 23rd, 24th, etc. They felt that it would be confusing for an American reader to read those dates and have her talk about summer, because it's winter there. And so they requested that I remove any reference to summer. And I was like, but it's a summer story and it's a summer romance. They spend the whole time at the beach and they're sweating and it's hot, and that's kind of the whole point. And they were like, yeah, it's okay, like they're still on vacation somewhere warm, but just don't confuse people with the word summer. So that was something I kind of pushed back against, but they were very firm that it would put American readers off. So which I just trusted that they know the market better. So I took out any reference to summer. It felt very strange, but like little things like that, where it's like it doesn't fundamentally change the story, but you just don't expect that that's going to be something that readers would find challenging necessarily.
And it seems to be a common experience. It's a funny little quirk, but I love the fact that your very Australian story is accessible to readers over there. So
yeah, it was really exciting. And I was a bit upset because I was meant to go over in April last year, which is when my first book came out over there, and obviously that got cancelled. So I still haven't been able to see it on shelves in America, but no, it's good to know that it's there, and to occasionally hear from readers from overseas is really special as well.
Yeah, and so thinking about this really strange couple of years that we've been having, has the way that you sort of approach writing or the way that you get inspiration changed in the past little while?
Yeah, look, I haven't been writing much, to be totally honest. Oh, that's probably unfair on myself. I have been writing. What's been really fun is I'm actually co-writing a book with someone for the first time, and it's an adult book actually, so that's a new challenge as well. That's been really fun. We brainstormed the story together. It's a romance, and we agreed that we just wanted to do something that would be just joyous and not have to stress too much about it and that kind of thing. And we write a chapter each and pass it back and forth. So that has been actually really positive and really fun. to work on, because it's a collaborative experience, which is so rare as a writer in general, but especially in lockdown when we can't really leave the house and you don't get much outside input. So that's been really special. But in terms of my own writing, I think with the deep end was really great for me because it felt so much more achievable. It was like, okay, I know the word count. It's about like a fifth or a quarter of what a novel length word count would be, which felt much more attainable. And so that helped me to focus, because I think I felt less overwhelmed. So I did a little bit at a time. And then other than that, like I have a couple of other, like I have a YA project that I've put on that has been on pause for a while that I'd really like to get back to. So yeah, I think that's been the biggest challenge, is just, I guess, trying to get the mental energy to actually do it. And I think that's something probably a lot of people have been struggling with. So yeah, I think probably what's helped me is like the shorter, more attainable goal, and then also just working with someone else and making it into more of a social and fun activity has been good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad that you've been really productive anyway, so that's really wonderful. And I keep thinking that even just through these conversations I've been having with a few people as part of this series has helped me an enormous amount. So I actually think just having those conversations with people and talking about writing and connecting with the community has been really helpful.
It makes such a difference. I think in the brief period when we were actually allowed out of the house, we managed to get Sydney Writers Festival in, which was we were so lucky. And that in itself, it was a really beautiful reminder of like, oh, see, this is the community, and we all love books and we all love reading, and many of us love writing, and you feel more alive and your brain wakes up on those kind of days. And we've just been missing that so much in the last 2 years. So I think it's hard, but yeah, like you definitely need that connection and actual like talking to people. I love social media. I'm addicted to social media, but it's just different when you actually talk to people. So yeah, I think community is really important.
There's been some amazing books that have come out this year. I loved like raw ripping through your new book in one sitting the other day. What have you been reading?
I've been reading, there's been a lot of great YA. I've read Danielle Bink's latest, The Monster of Her Age, which is great. What else have I been reading? Tobias Madden's Anything But Fine was really lovely. Yeah, I'm also reading at the moment, I just started Are You There, Buddha by Pip Harry, it was actually funny because earlier in the year, it was like a Twitter conversation came up, and it turned like, I don't know how it turned out. We talked about myself, Pip, and then Emily Gale, who was co-writing with Nova Wheat, but we all talked about, we actually were all working on like swimming books or swimming related books. So I went out and made sure I bought them. Yeah, so now I'm reading Pip's book because I'm like, well, supporting the swim team, I suppose.
I know that you'll like Pip's book. I think I can see readers moving from hers and Emily and Nova's work as well right into your books. And thanks so much, Jenna, for chatting with me today. This episode is being supported by Bookgrove, which is an independent bookshop down in Ocean Grove, which is actually my hometown bookshop. So when everybody can, please go and visit Stacey and her team. But in the meantime, you can use the link in the description to buy Jenna's books and have a little virtual visit down at the beautiful beachside town of Ocean Grove. So thank you, Jenna. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
I just hope everyone's doing well as they can, and I know it's a bit hard to read and concentrate at the moment, so just be gentle with yourselves and enjoy it as much as you can, seek joy as much as you can. But yeah, no, thank you, it's been great chatting to you.
Nature's corrupted and such is far away.